Retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page. There you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books for $10 paperback and $2.99 ebook download. On today's episode, we have a special guest who will provide unique insight into the inner workings of Rikers Island. Before joining the NYPD, my next guest was a New York City corrections officer. If you read my books, you know him as my morally flexible, duplicitous brother, Fredo Ferrari. Fredo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Vic.
You're very low energy today.
It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I just got up from my nap.
I know. Middle age sucks, doesn't it?
After 50, it's all downhill.
You know, it's funny. After I got into writing these NYPD books, and you're in a lot of them, especially Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate, where I detail us growing up and our childhood, people reach out to me on social media and they're, do you really have a brother, Fredo? Does Fredo really exist? Did he do those things? And I'm like, well, listen, I put a spin on things, and his real name isn't Fredo, obviously. But a lot of those things that happened in our childhood are true.
You're sugarcoating a lot of the stuff that we did. You are putting a nice spin on it. Now with camera phones and the circle of iron and everything around the city, I would have been put in Guantanamo Bay.
Well, you were before your time. You know, it's funny. Kids nowadays, you know, they don't have no idea what like Halloween was. When we were kids, we would start stockpiling eggs for weeks. We would go to the store and buy one at a time. We'd put them in the fridge. We didn't care if they went bad.
You could go up to Grand Union and walk right up to the manager and say, I want a case of eggs. And the guy would be like, okay, and sell you a case of eggs. And you would walk out with a case and immediately start throwing them at people.
Yeah, and no one stopped us. And you were ahead of your time in that you would buy yogurt, big tubs of yogurt, weeks before Halloween, and you would put them under the porch and crack the top open so it would go bad. And then you used it as a bioweapon. So everyone throwing eggs, and you had like this little scoop, and you would throw it on people, and the smell, my God, it was like you were throwing bubonic plague on people.
I have to apologize for an open apology to anybody and everybody that were victims of my pranks or whatever, because I don't understand why I wasn't in my right mind back then. Now I'm a very nice, peaceful guy. I wave at people and stuff like that. I'm very easy to talk to. I don't know what I was thinking back then. So this is the open apology to say I'm sorry.
Well, you know, they say the mind doesn't fully develop until you're 25 years old. I think we were even behind that. You know, the story that's in my book, which you're going to remember, was the time you found a live mortar shell at one of the beaches, and you had it in the
Jones
basement.
Beach.
And,
Jones Beach.
Well, let me paint the picture.
By all means, paint
I'm
away.
about 14. Fredo's 12. I go into the basement one day, and Fredo's got what looks like a shell that would be, you know, fired out of a rocket, sitting in a vice grip in my father's workbench. And we're down there looking at it, toying around with it. We don't know any better. And Dad comes down the stairs and he goes, "What the hell is this?" And take it from there.
Okay, well, we picked it up at Jones Beach. I think it was Section 3, all the way at the end, where they would do... We had no idea they were doing live mortar fire during World War II, testing out shells. So I found the thing in the sand. We were throwing it against rocks. So I figured I'd take it home. I could find something to do with it. So I didn't want my friend's mother to know what I had. I mean, if she saw it, she probably would have taken it away or screamed or whatever or called the cop. So I took it and I hid it in my shorts. So it looked like I had a boner the entire time home. I get it home. We take it and I started hitting it on... I wanted to make it go off, but I had no idea how to do it, not knowing anything about it. And I put it in the vise. I'm getting ready to slam it with a hammer. You come downstairs. You are always the voice of reason. I made your life interesting because I just had no idea what I was doing. And what are you doing? Oh, I don't know. I was going to hit it with a hammer. Should you hit it with a hammer? I don't know. And then, so then you said, let's call Dad. Dad comes in. What the hell is this? What are you trying to do? Do you know what this is? No, we were going to try and set it off. You can't set, what are you... You can't set it off in the house. The running joke was, because we were right underneath where my grandmother used to sit, that if I would have hit that thing, it would have killed me and it would have blown Grandma off the chair. So that's when Dad says, well, we got to take it to the police. And all I could think of was, he's taking my toy away from me. Not thinking of any kind of repercussions or anything. And that's when we took it to the police station.
Yeah, Dad got treated like a terrorist. I remember the desk officer, like now that we were both cops, we know, what goes on in a police station. The desk officer was this old timer, and he looks at it, he goes, where did you find this? And you're like, Section 2, Jones Beach, you were proud. And I remember they put it in the garage, and they didn't let us leave, and the bomb squad showed up, and they interviewed
the thing
Dad.
was like the thing was like this big.
Yeah,
and
no,
it was
that big.
It was depleted uranium.
So growing up, we grew up in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx, and Fredo and I had the pleasure of rubbing elbows with one of Throgs Neck's most notorious criminals, Tommy Uva. Now let me paint a picture. Tommy Uva was a heroin addict who served time for armed robbery. When he got out of the can, he and his wife began robbing mob social clubs. Well, after a while, that didn't sit well with the Sons of Italy, and Tommy and his bride were cut down in a hail of bullets on a Queen Street. And to this day, I'm baffled, but for whatever reason, Hollywood thought it would be a good idea to make a Bonnie and Clyde movie romanticizing Tommy Uva's life. And they made this low-budget film, Rob the Mob. And I remember this is 10 years ago, you go, you're not going to believe this. They made a movie about Tommy Uva's life, and I'm like, first thing I said was, what? You're out of your mind. And you're like, no, look it up. And I'm like, why? If you lived in Throgs Neck, and you were on Tremont Avenue as a teenager, and it didn't matter what end of East Tremont Avenue, you were going to bump into Tommy Uva. Tommy Uva was a bully. He was skinny. He wasn't a tough kid like they portray in the movie. He was skinny. He was about 125 pounds. He was a heroin addict. But he hung out with these really rough guys that were tough. And if you messed with Tommy, chances are these guys were going to kick your head in. Plus, Tommy was a mad hatter. I mean, Tommy would hit you in the head with a baseball bat. Tommy would run you over with his car. Again, not with his hands, but whatever he had in his hands, he would use on you. So I've told stories about bumping into him on East Tremont Avenue. Why don't you go into a couple of stories about Rob the Mob's Tommy Uva?
Tommy was a gangster without a gang. We had talked earlier, and I mentioned Tommy Uva, and you said, oh, God, he is one person that would not be missed. And we shouldn't speak ill of the dead, but it's Tommy. And everybody in Throgs Neck has a story about Tommy. And there is never a positive interaction. He knew me. We hung out in a group on Roosevelt Avenue off Tremont or Randall Avenue. And there was between 10 and 30 guys at any given point just hanging around. And Tommy would show up, always trying to pull some kind of scam. Back then I was working at Baskin-Robbins. And Tommy was high. His pupils were like little tiny dots. And he comes up to me and he goes, hey, I know you. He talked out of the side of his face with his big bushy mustache. He was like 15 and had a giant mustache. He goes, hey, I know you. And I went, yeah, I know you too, Tommy. He says, yeah, you work at Baskin and Robbins, right? I says, yeah. He says, we can do this. I says, we can do what? He goes, we can rob Baskin Robbins. I says, no, we're not robbing I says, I'm not robbing Baskin Robbins. He goes, shut up. Let me tell you how it's going to go down. I walk into Baskin Robbins. I pull out a gun. I shoot you. The girl behind the counter goes crazy. We go right to the safe, and then we get all the money. We'll split the money up later on. And I'm looking at in complete disbelief, and I went, because this is junkie talk. I went, no, Tommy, you're not. Shut up. All right. Don't be a bitch. All right, I'll hit you with the gun. I'll come in there. I'll scream. I'll hit you with the gun. You go down, then the girl will get the money, and then we'll split it up later on. I says, Tommy, you're not robbing Baskin. Shut up. All right, listen, we're going to work on it. I says, no, we're not going to work on it, Tommy. And luckily, he drove up in a stolen car, and right after our conversation, cops pull up, see the stolen car, start asking questions about it. He walks over and goes, yeah, what do you want? Get away from my car. And they throw him in cuffs and take him away.
Yeah,
and
that sounds like him.
Now you'd figure Tommy would be gone, like, he'd be gone for quite a while. 2 or 3 days later, I see Tommy walking around Tremont Avenue.
Yeah, he was like a cockroach. Unfortunately, it was the only thing that got rid of him was the mob. And didn't when you were working in a gas station, tell the story about you and your friends worked in gas stations on opposite sides of the street?
Yeah, I worked at an Amoco station, and it was a Saturday night, and luckily the boss was working, was sitting outside, and he was always get the money up front, because people would try and get gas and take off.
Pull out.
Right, and it was you'd have the kid pumping it for you. So I was working at one gas station, and the next block over, my friend was working. Tommy pulls up. He's got this banana yellow Camaro. He's in sweatpants with no shirt. There's another guy sitting next to him. He pulls up. He screams out the window at me, "Hey, fill it up!" So I turn around and I look at my boss, and he goes, "Ask him for the money." I says, "Money up first, Tommy." He says, "Shut up! I'll pull that gas hose out. I'll pour gas. I'll light you on fire." I says, "Nah, money first, Tommy." And he goes, "I'll kill both of you. I'll light you all on fire." So the boss gets up. He starts walking towards the car. He goes, "Hey, you punk." Tommy lights the tires on his Camaro, speeds off, goes up the block, turns around, goes to the next gas station, pulls in where my friend's working. "Fill it up." My buddy goes, "Okay," starts filling it up with gas. He walks up to the window and he says, "Okay, can I see that?" He shouldn't have put it in the thing to begin with without getting the money. The thing's maybe about $10, $12. He walks up, he says, "Okay, that's going to be $10, $12. Tommy takes off with the nozzle still attached. Rips the nozzle off. Gas spraying all over the place. Tommy goes shooting up Tremont Avenue with the hose hanging out of his car. Luckily, the woman that owned the place was in the booth. I don't know what she was doing, playing crossword puzzles or whatever. She hit the button to stop it. Not much gas came out there. But, and then the cops pull up. And they said, "What happened?" She says, "Tommy," they says, "Can you describe the person?" It's like, "Yeah, Tommy Uva, banana yellow Camaro." It's like, we just passed that guy on the way up. He was truly a menace. There was never any good interactions with Tommy, ever.
No, I used to work at, it sounds like everybody in Throgs Neck worked in a gas station at one time or another, but I did too, a different one. And he was same thing. He'd pull in with one of these shitbanger cars. He didn't know if it was stolen or, borrowed or what. And then he would say, "Give me $2, because back then gas was like 67 cents, right? You'd put $2 in gas and he goes, "I only got $1.83. And he'd throw change at you and just drive out of the gas station. It's like a lot of times you just went into your own pocket because it just wasn't worth it dealing with him. You just weren't going to win, he wasn't afraid of the police. He really wasn't afraid of anything. And ultimately that was his downfall. But anyway, so then you went into the Marines, you got out of the Marines, and then you became a New York City corrections officer. What was that like for you? Like just going into the academy and, having your first civil service job?
Well, you always knew what you wanted to be. You always knew that you wanted to be a cop. I had no idea what I wanted to be. I kind of went along, I went with the flow. And I got into trouble at 17. I dropped out of high school, and basically the only way out for me was the Marines. I was in that much trouble. Once I got out of the Marines, I had focus. I was working job after job, waiting for a civil service job to come around. Police department wasn't hiring. I took police, I took the fire department test, I took sanitation, I took corrections. Within like 3 or 4 months, corrections called me up. And I says, "I want to go in." You said, "Tibet,
Well, wait, hold on. You got the letter, "Tomorrow you can start with corrections." And the day you got that, the day you were informed you were going into the corrections academy, you got the letter telling you to report the following day to begin your process with the police department. And you said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Fredo, if I were you, forget corrections. I know it's going to be another 6 or 8 months. Go with the NYPD." And you went, "Nope, I'm going to corrections."
Well, I thought I was a tough guy. I got out of the Marines. I got my muscles on. I was working construction at that point, and I was hanging off the side of buildings. I was doing the Daily News building. I was doing the Pan Am building. I was working with brick. I was working with all these big guys. It's like, what am I can handle this. I'm a tough guy. So the academy was easy. Basically, it's counting and dealing with people. You learn how to talk to people. The minute you get onto Rikers Island, because they didn't have like a go to Rikers Island and meet the guys.
But is Rikers Island, like out of the corrections academy, did they give you a choice of like going to, back then they had the Bronx House of Detention or the Queen's House, or is it kind of like the NYPD? You get out of the academy, you don't know anybody, you're going to the 4-2, or the 7-5. You're going to a shitty precinct.
Right. The borough houses were coveted houses because the island, the Rock as we called it, was the absolute worst place to go. If you could get a nice place in the Bronx or a nice place in Manhattan, you could pull up right alongside. If you go to the Rock, it is a miserable place. And I'm like, I'm tough, I can handle it. Well, guess what? You get to the island, once you get to the island, it takes you about an hour to get to your jail. You got to go through 3 checkpoints, find parking, walk a mile to the buses, take a bus, go through 2 or 3 more checkpoints, get to your jail, go through 2 or 3 more checkpoints, 5 more checkpoints before you even get to roll call. So you got to go at least an hour and a half, get to that island. That's where the misery starts. Then you get stuck in whatever housing area. So when I got there, I wanted to be they put me in general population. I was in this place called NIC, and I go into general population, and I don't like it. I want to be with the real hardcore criminals. I'm with scammers and crackheads and con artists and petty thieves. And so I says, I want to go with the worst of the worst because I'm a tough guy. I was not a tough guy. I thought I was. So I volunteered to go to punitive segregation in HDM, which is like where they put the worst of the worst of the worst. Volunteer for it, do a couple of tours there. The captain at my jail says, wait a minute, we're starting up our own punitive segregation on the 3rd floor. If you really want to go and work with the hardcore guys, we'll put you in, we'll give you a steady tour. So I volunteered for it. And once again, I throw myself in these stupid situations. I was making the right decision, but little did I know what I was in for and the cast of characters that I was going to meet.
But before we get to that, before we get to the All-Star unit, you guys had to work mandatory overtime on Rikers Island, right? You couldn't go home when you wanted to go home. It's like, hey, 2 guys banged in, you're staying on the island.
Yeah, it was called a stick list. So there was, and then, so you work your 8 hours and 20 minutes, and then you get stuck for another 8 hours and 20 minutes, and then you go, okay, I got to be back here in another 8 hours. Do I take an hour and a half to get off the island, and then another an hour and a half? So a lot of times you either slept in your car, or you slept in the basement of the jail. So most of the time you didn't leave.
I don't know if it's true, but I've heard if you do a 20-year career in corrections, it's almost like doing an 8-year jail sentence with the overtime.
It's absolutely miserable. It takes years off your life. The food, because you're eating inmate food. You can't bring in your own food. So for breakfast you get, because they won't serve pork to Muslims, so they won't have bacon, so they give you fried bologna, because it's beef bologna. And the eggs are powdered. So, and they stick to the metal tray so they're green. So it was green eggs and bologna in the morning. The stuff was horrible. You're dealing with terrible people. It shaves years off your life. And if you ever see a correction officer, they just have that look in their eyes of just like, I hate everything.
Cops have that look too if they're on patrol in a shitty precinct, like the guys that never want to leave. You know what I mean? The guys
Midnights do that to you.
The midnight guys, yeah.
Yeah, they're afraid of the sun.
Was there afraid of the sun? I know. Well, if you're doing midnights in a precinct or anywhere, you're going to work, you want breakfast and everyone's eating steak, and then you come home, you want a steak and everyone's eating eggs. Was there a lot of corruption on Rikers Island? Like, how did that work?
A lot of corruption on a very low level. Corruption on dealing with inmates. Every once in a while you'd hear it, because a lot of these guys know each other from the streets. I even knew one guy. One of my friends wound up in a bad way, and years later, I'm working a dorm, and I see him come walking by. And he looked at me, he eyeballed me, I eyeballed him. I gave a second look to make sure it was him, and we didn't say anything to each other. And then later on, when there was nobody around, he came up to me and he goes, listen, I know we were friends back in the day, but you can't talk to me. I says, you think I want anybody knowing that I'm talking to you? And he's like, okay, so we'll just keep it that way. We won't talk to each other. We won't. And I said, okay, that's the best way. Some of these guys know each other from the neighborhood, so there's kind of like dealings going on. So there's a little there's little bits of corruption here and there. Maybe they're sneaking stuff in. Most of the time, you don't hear about it or see it.
Did you ever see one of your coworkers get locked up for smuggling or trying to get somebody off the island, or something big?
No, not my 4.5, 5 years there.
So after you went to this new specialized unit, which we used to call the All-Star Unit, you get a lot of famous and notorious people that get locked up in New York City. And, the way the city works, because it's probably a lot like the NYPD, they don't want anything happening to these people because it's going to be on the front page of the newspaper. So let's start with one of New York City's most eligible bachelors and resident cannibal, Daniel Rankowitz.
Rankowitz
Killed and dismembered his girlfriend, then cooked her and served her to homeless people at a New York City soup kitchen. As I remember it, he was your pen pal. I remember we were young. I mean, I'd stop by mom and dad's house, and you were there, and you go, "You got to see this," and you'd hand me a letter, and I go, it was like this ramblings of a madman. I go, "What is this shit?" And you're like, that guy that killed and cooked his girlfriend? I go, yeah, I remember that. He goes, he thinks I'm his pal, and he writes me letters.
Somewhere in one of my bins with I have some of the stuff that he wrote. When I tell you that I volunteered for this tier, it was 13 cells, and it's a cell within a cell within a cell. So these 13 guys can't get at each other, and there's a walkway around the outside. So they're in their own little cell, and they have another little common area, and then there's another. So there was no inmate contact in between the other inmates. So you could put the worst guys upon the worst guys, and they would never be able to touch each other. So Daniel act like he was in the Grateful Dead, like he was Jerry Garcia. Love and peace, man, and smoke weed, and everything's good, and what's for dinner? And he got fat. He was skinny when he came in, but he got fat. And you would think that he was the nicest guy in the world, and nobody in jail is ever guilty. You can ask anybody. Nobody ever did it. They will never cop to it. He said he was set up by local drug dealers and Satanists and everything. But at night, there was a catwalk behind where you used to be able to go down. There was a special way to get in. They couldn't see you. They could see you walking down one way, but they couldn't see you coming down the other way. I used to hear him in the cell hailing Satan and talking about when he goes downstate that he's going to have to kill a correction officer and drink his blood. He was a very good manipulator, as showing that he could talk to people and he could be normal, but at the same time he was out of his mind.
So it sounded like bad reception on a television set. It would come back and forth.
Yeah, he could play a normal person when he wanted to, but when he was by himself, that's when the crazy would come out.
You know what's funny? When I started researching him for this interview, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Right.
But they still got him locked up on that island. You know that island, Ward's Island?
Yeah, they'll never let him off. I'm waiting for another letter.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Has he written you anything lately?
No.
All right, another one of your clients was Colombo family hitman Greg Scarpa, also known as the Grim Reaper. And he probably killed close to 30 people. And while he was out on bail on a federal case, he got into a gun battle and had his eye shot out. Finally, they had enough of him and they remanded him. He wound up on Rikers Island, and he was one of your, clients.
Well, he had gotten a blood transfusion from his bodyguard. When he got shot, he got a blood transfusion. And
he got no. He got a blood transfusion. He had ulcers prior to getting shot. He already had AIDS. He had gotten a blood transfusion as a result of ulcers. And
okay,
yeah,
so
one of the guys in his crew had AIDS, and yeah, that's how he got it.
Okay, so however he got AIDS, he wound up in the AIDS dorm, and the AIDS dorm was a special place where there was 60 guys with no T cells. Now T cells are what fights viruses in your body. So when you're down to like 100 T cells or less, that means any kind of infection will wipe you out. So he was either below 100 or they put him in for a special reason. Anyway, he was just the nicest old guy walking. He had a nice sweatsuit that he walked around in, shuffling around, saying hi to everybody. Everybody liked him. there was no Google back then, so I didn't know he was the angel of death. He was just the nice guy that would come and say, "Hey, Officer Ferrari, how you doing?" So interactions were always pretty pleasant. So one day, but his eyes were like solid. He had
Eye.
His one eye. He either wore an eye patch or had his fake eye in. And it was rumored that when he wore his eye patch, he was smuggling contraband in there. I never lifted it up to pull it out, but he would either go eyeless, have an eye patch, or have his eye in. So it was, but when you're in the AIDS dorm and you're dying, you just, whatever you do, you do. We really don't care. Just live the rest of your life out. But anyway, so he had asked some of the other officers, could you bring stuff in for him? Could you maybe get candy from the machine? So he never asked me anything. So one day he comes up to me and he goes, Officer Ferrari, could you do me a favor? I could really use some M&Ms, and I know you got them in the machine out there. I says, listen, you know me. You get what you're supposed to get from me. I don't give any special favors. No problem, no problem. So another day he comes up to me, maybe a week later, and says, listen, my skin gets really dry. There's some special lotions that I use. They sell them in the stores, but maybe a friend of mine could give you these lotions and you could bring it in for me. I'll compensate you for them. And I looked at him and I went, I don't do this stuff. And especially that I wouldn't meet anything on the outside. And even this conversation is not a good conversation for me. And he stopped. And suddenly this nice little old man, his face changed. And he gets his smile peels back, and he's got like these shark teeth now. He outside one corner, and he's like, I know where you live, right? I know you live in. And that kind of knocked me back. And I went, yeah? Well, I know where you live. And he goes, yeah, where do I live? I says, you live in the B dorm in the third bed. And he gave me a dirty look and he goes, you're a real son of a bitch. And he walked away from me. And after that, he had no use for me. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. Suddenly the kind, gentle old man went away, and suddenly he looked like a shark. He would just he would just pace up and down. Suddenly that nice old man routine disappeared. That's when I left to go to the police department, that was the last I saw of him. He was in the AIDS dorm.
Yeah, he was a stone cold killer. And he was in the thick of it when you had that Colombo family war, when the Persico faction against the Arena faction, and he just was, he was instrumental. He was in the thick of things with that battle. Then you had another client, one of NYPD's most notorious criminals by the name of Larry Davis. Larry Davis was him and his crew of guys were going around doing home invasions and ripping off other drug dealers, and he had killed a couple of guys. And how much of a badass he was over in the Bronx, and he was staying at his sister's house. When they knocked on the door, Larry Davis comes out shoots up a bunch of cops, escapes, and eventually turns himself in months later and went to trial. It was a big thing in New York City. But you had Larry Davis on your tier, and he was a high-profile inmate. You said he was one of the worst as far as being manipulative.
Well, if you want to go top 10, he is definitely in the top 10 most manipulative humans I ever. And his two attorneys were Kunstler and Kuby. Ron Kuby and William Kunstler. And they taught. He wasn't bad enough to begin with, because he was, the guy had like a Tyson punch. His arms were huge, and for a guy that was supposed to be in a wheelchair, he
claimed, right?
Right. The lawyers gave him a wheelchair. They sued to get him a wheelchair. Everything was lawsuits. His legs you could take 3 of my legs and put it together, and that was one of his legs. All night long, he would hang because there was cameras on him. He would hang a sheet in front of his cell and work out all night long. And then during the day, he would drag himself around on the wheelchair. But he was the guy in the yard curling the 80, 90-pound dumbbells. He was a monster. And if he could get near you, he was so manipulative. He would play every inmate and get whatever he could. Everybody was like, oh my God, Larry Davis, he's a god to them.
Right, and he shot a bunch of cops. So
in the camp. He was a hero in the jail. So everybody would go and Larry would go, hey, let me get some carrot cakes. Let me get some beef sticks. Let me get your phone time. Let me get. So he would. It's like a mob thing. So he would get everything that he could from somebody. The guy would have a magazine. Let me get your magazine. Let me get this. Let me get that. And then when the guy would try and get it back from him, Larry would get up close to him. He would get up to the bars because there was no contact between the two of them except for that one area in the bars where they would pass back and forth. He would go like lightning. He would dive, catch the guy, and smash him against the bars and not let him go. You couldn't get this guy's grip off you. He would smash him until the guy was jelly. That guy would get transferred to the hospital, and a new guy would come in for Larry to use. So there was no goodwill for Larry either. But Larry actually liked me because I was fair. I didn't. If he was supposed to get 2 blankets, he got 2 blankets. If he was supposed to get a special meal, he got a special meal. I didn't spit it. I didn't do anything. I was kind of. It was my first real city job, so I didn't want to screw it up before I went to the police department, so I didn't want to get accused of anything. Go with him. So, and there was a lot of times he requested me to go with him to the hospital, or like if he was getting transferred for medication or something like that, he would say, I want my mighty Whitey to come with me. I want Whitey to come with me. And they'd say, okay, Ferrari, you go with him. It's like, wait a minute, why me? I don't want to go with them. It's not my tour. I'm going home. It's like, now he requested you. And it's like, but he doesn't get to make the decision here. You make the decision. And like I said, not only was the guy...
He'll pitch a bitch if they give him somebody else.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Also,
they were playing it. He would...
he used to do the most foul stuff. So if he hated you, and he would just get it in his head that he hated you, he would shit and piss liquid. He would mix it in the toilet, and he would get a Suave bottle, and he would fill the Suave bottle up with the liquid piss and shit. And as you went by, he would have it hidden behind him. This guy would practice all day long whipping it out, and he would spray you up and down with liquid feces. And the squad comes in, he has wreck, he fights them, they take him out, they put a lawsuit against the squad for beating him up. They take his bottles away. So then they says he needed a catheter. He didn't need a catheter, but they said he needed a catheter. He used to fill the catheter up with piss and shit. And then as the captain would walk by, he would would shoot it through the bars at him.
Oh my God.
The best was this captain. He says, Captain, I swear to God, I'm going to be a good guy. I promise I'm going to be a good guy. Can I have my shampoo back? And he goes, okay, give him his shampoo back. And I'm going, boss, don't give him his shampoo back. This guy, he's playing you. He's doing all right. Give him his shampoo back. Give him the shampoo back. Empties the shampoo bottle. Waits for him to come by, and then squirts the captain up and down with the piss and crap again. So that captain takes it away. 2 or 3 days later, he got an orange for lunch because they used to feed him in the cells. He didn't give all his food back. He kept the orange. Captain's walking by. I can't believe how he got it through 3 sets of bars. He threw this orange through 3 sets of bars and hit the captain right in the face. Not to say that there was joy because this captain was a dick for giving him back his stuff, but there was actual joy watching him clean orange pits off his face, saying, Captain, I told you so. You can't do this with him.
Well, Larry's luck ran out because he got sentenced for a homicide, or a couple of homicides, and he was in upstate New York. Got into an argument about 10 years ago with another inmate in an upstate New York prison where he was stabbed to death. So,
I'm surprised he lasted that long. I'm surprised.
You didn't think he'd run the prison, or you think?
No. He was hated by everybody. He joined the Nation of Islam. One of the other guys that I had told you about, his name was El Sayad Noser.
Yeah, he was the guy behind the Monica Hani homicide, and then they linked him to financing to the first World Trade Center bombing.
Right. So Larry had used up all the goodwill of his local people, the Brooklyn people, the Bronx people. Everybody kind of saw him for what he was. So he needed a gang behind him, so he joined the Nation of Islam. So he became Adam Abdul Hakim. And El Sayad Noser was the one that he was his sponsor. And of course, Larry burned through. He used him like you would not believe, day in and day out. getting prayer rugs from him, getting extra food from him, getting everything from him, until finally he couldn't get any more. I actually caught him before he got him, because he came up to the cell and he's going, I need my phone time, I need this, I need that. I saw Larry going for him. Larry was going to crush his head, but I couldn't. When you have two high profiles like that, it would have been bad on my part if I would have let him get smashed. So I actually stopped him from getting squeezed in between the bars, which Larry would have done.
Didn't you also have that lunatic that burned up the Happyland? So he set fire to a social club and killed 87 people?
Yeah, I had Julio Gonzalez.
What was he like?
Well, this is one of those cases where you do something really stupid and it kills a lot of people. There was a social club that only had one entrance and one exit, and this nutcase breaks up with his girlfriend, and she was running the front door. So he goes up there. He tries to get back together with her. She says no. Goes across the street, fills up a gallon container with gasoline, lights it on fire, throws it at the entrance. She runs. Everybody else in the club dies. There's only one way in and one way out, and that was covered in an inferno. It was a illegal club.
People.
No windows, no doors. They either burned to death or were killed with smoke. There was people at the bar that still had money in their hands, still had drink in their hands, that were melted to the chairs. There were people that were trying to claw at the walls to get out. I don't think this idiot even realized what he did. I don't know if he got I know he was sentenced. I don't know if he got off for a temporary insanity or whatever.
He's never getting out.
Yeah. But he came in.
Deal with?
He was. We always got them 3 days after they were initially booked. So he came in. All he did was cry. He was in his cell, a little skinny guy with a big puff of hair. All he did was cry. All he did was speak Spanish. And guys were flicking matches at him everywhere that he went. Everybody was horrified at what he did. And anytime he went by, if he went for medication, if he went for a shower, everybody was just flicking matches at him. He was a pain in the ass, though, because there was a language barrier, but he was just a pain in the ass altogether.
I mean, do you think he realized what he did? Like
No,
his life was
absolutely not. No, I don't. You know, what was his intent? His intent was to scare his girlfriend or burn his girlfriend. Probably, yeah. Was his intent to kill 84 people? I don't think so. So that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those unfortunate things. And I remember, I mean, this was early in my NYPD career. I remember as a result of that, they had Vice going after all those social clubs, and they were going around with the fire department closing them down. Because a lot of these places, it's just a storefront. And in the back, you know, they got card games or music. And, you know, from the front, it doesn't look like anything. But in the back, they got a big party going. And like you said, it's funny. I just read in the paper yesterday in the Post that some girl was in a social club out in Queens, and I don't know, either somebody put something in her drink or she fell ill. She passes out in this social club over the weekend, and one of the guys in the bar grabs her phone and texts her family, finds her sister in the phone and says, hey, get your drunken sister out of here, and they put her in a back room. Well, she dies. And then they realize that she's dead in the back room, and they all leave. Because nobody wants to get in trouble because it's an illegal club, and the poor woman died in the back of this club. Anyway, you also had a guard, a famous Jamaican drug lord, Delroy Uzi Edwards. What was he like?
Once again, when you're talking about real criminals, most of the time you're dealing with petty thieves. Even some of the light case felons or something like that, the reason why they're in jail is because they were stupid and they got caught. When you're dealing with a guy like this, he stood 6'2", 6'3", muscles everywhere. The guy had been shot, stabbed, sliced. He was big over in Jamaica during the unrest in, I guess, the early 80s. He was known for shooting an Uzi, even when he got to Brooklyn. He was instrumental in dealing crack throughout Brooklyn. He loved to beat people to death with a baseball bat. When I first got there, he had already been there. And I was green behind the ears, so a lot of times these guys could get me with an initial scam or an initial play, And I would walk by him in his cell, and he would look at me and go, his mouth was wired shut. His jaw was broken. And he used to go, hey, Joe, I'm going to kill you, through the bars. And he also had a bunch of gold teeth, too. And not that I could understand him to begin with. I could understand I'm going to kill you. So I walked by the tier. Listen, most of the time on that tier, people would call you names or whatever. But you're going up and down. So after a couple of times, I go to the security captain and I say, listen, this guy's telling me he's going to kill me. And he goes, all right, I'll just make a note of it. So one day I walk by, and he says, he goes, CO, when you get to the other side of the bridge, I'm going to have my posse there. Your head's going to explode like a melon. And I didn't let him, I just kept on. I went, okay. I go to security captain, I says, listen, this guy, I don't know what I did. The guy keeps threatening to kill me. Should I have like a cop outside my house or something? So they let me take a radio home. And then when I go over the bridge, I'm looking to my left, I'm looking to my right. And then, so I asked one of the other COs, Mike, that used to work the day tour. This guy was a solid guy. I says, Mike, does he he goes, yeah, he threatens everybody. He says, he's playing you. He's playing you, Fredo. He says, nothing is going to happen. He says, just keep telling him, yeah, and he's going to stop. I went, okay. And he kept telling me, he goes, your head's going to explode like a melon. And one day I went, I love melon. And he laughed, and then he never said it again. So you learn, like, not to take things, like, when to take things seriously and not to take things seriously.
Well, what's ironic is, according to Delroy's Murderpedia page, he was the first dealer to sell crack cocaine in Brooklyn. So how long were you in corrections for? How many years?
4.5 years.
So after 4.5 years with corrections, you do what's called a rollover. So a rollover is, if you work for a city agency, you can go into the NYPD. You would think it's fast track, but it's not. So for my brother to roll over from corrections, he had to start the process all over again. He had to take another police test. He had to meet with an investigator. He had to take another series of tests. He had to take physical exams. You go into the police academy. Did that suck for you? I mean, you've gone through Rikers Island. You've gone through the corrections academy. Now you're going to be treated like a baby again in the police academy. Did it just like roll off your back, or was it a pain in the ass for you?
Oh, well, I before we move there, I got to tell you this one story in the jail. This is a quick one.
Yeah, good.
Because I was working the receiving room with my buddy and partner, Big Mike, and one of the Jamaican posse guys comes in, big head full of dreadlocks. These guys used to have their hair X-rayed because they'd hide bullets in there, they'd hide razors in there. So the guy's standing 6 foot something, muscles everywhere, tattoos everywhere. So we make him strip. So me, I'm a little guy, I'm 5'9". He's towering over me. It's me and Big Mike in the receiving room by ourselves. This guy comes in late at night after court. So I say, okay, strip. He strips down. I says, okay, take your pants off. This guy's dick is huge. All right? I says, okay, squat. So the guy does a little bend, and it's like, no, squat. So you have to make them squat. So if they have anything up their ass, it'll come out. It'll force it out. Plus, it's like run your fingers through your mouth. Let me see the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. So, squat. The guy does a little squat. I said, squat all the way down. He goes, me no can squat no more. I says, Mike, this guy, he's not squatting down. So Mike was big and lumbering, and he walks up and he gets behind him. He goes, he told you to squat. He goes, I am squatting. He goes, squat again. He goes to squat. Mike throws his hands on his shoulders. Now, Mike was like bench pressing 400 pounds. He takes him and pushes him down. Guy squats down, and something pops out of his ass. It popped out of his ass about this much. So we both step back. Okay, we're both going for the clubs. And he goes, ain't no big deal, man. Reaches back there, pulls out, it's a condom, and in the condom is a 007 knife. Now, if you remember, 007 knives were
big.
It looked like a Charleston chew bar, covered in shit inside a condom. He throws it on the table. There is now shit on my table. And he says, what you gonna do? Arrest me now? I'm already in shackles. Standing there with his dick hanging out, and I look at Mike, he looks at me. Mike takes the poker, pushes it in the garbage, and he goes, clean it up and go to your house. And the guy pokes his head back and he goes, really, man? Gets his clothes back on, gets up, goes to the house. So at that point, what do? You're going to rearrest him for a knife that went through 3 checkpoints? Everybody that went through the checkpoint is going to get in trouble for not searching this guy? We're going to be, it would have turned into a huge McGilla.
Well,
so we just left it in the garbage.
Yeah, but that's the same with the NYPD, right? So you're supposed to, at the beginning of your tour, when you get a radio call, you're supposed to search the back seat of the police car and under the seats. And if something turns up in there, it like you just said, it creates a shitstorm because it might not even have been the last 2 cops that had the car. It could have been three tours ago, or when something turns up in the cells at Bronx Central Booking, it's like timeout, and then they're looking to take someone's head off. So I definitely.
It becomes your bag.
Yeah, exactly. And then you look like a scumbag for starting the ball rolling. So what was like the police academy like for you? Was it nonsense or was it a pain in the ass for you?
Oh, the police academy was such a break. So I was working in the jail for 4.5 years. In 1991, I got activated for Desert Storm. I actually volunteered to go to Desert Storm to get out of the jail. And I was away for about 6 months. Came back, did more time in the jail, was miserable. And then when the police department called me, I could not have been a happier person. I was eating people food again. I was seeing other nobody was throwing flaming anything at me. My head didn't have to be on a swivel. The work was easy. The exercise was easy. I was so happy to be in there for 4, 5, 6 months, running around in circles and debating social science and stuff. And I was getting paid a 5-year pay. I'm at top pay. Everybody else is complaining about their little checks. And I'm getting...
Right, because you started your city time already.
Oh, I was happy. I was extremely happy to be in the police academy.
Well, after the police academy, you wound up in one of the busiest precincts in the city at the time. The 3-4 precinct was in Washington Heights. And for those of you that don't know, that precinct used to be up there in the top 5 of homicides, gun arrests. It was like the Wild West up there. And the precinct got so busy, and what they wound up doing is splitting it in half and creating another precinct. What was it like when you first got up there?
See, when it was a 3-4 precinct, it went from 155th Street to 237, I believe. The end of Manhattan.
To 218th Street, the border going over into
218.
The 50.
So east and west. So there was some nice areas. There was when the riots happened, they decided that they needed a secondary precinct. So that's when they cut the precinct in half. And anybody with less than 5 years, not my time not counting, got shipped to the bad part of the precinct. And what we used to call the shit end of the stick. So they made a temporary precinct, and all the rookies and guys that wanted steady posts went down to the lower half of the precinct. And when I say it's not a good precinct, there isn't a decent place to eat. There's not a good post to stand. It's mostly people that hate you on a daily basis.
Well, the drug dealers at that time ran the neighborhood.
Right. It was not a favorable place to be at any. You always had to hug the buildings when you were walking around for fear that somebody would throw something off the roof at you, which was called airmail. Somebody pissing off the roof at you, somebody spitting or throwing crap off the roof. Ceiling tiles would come flying. Anything would come out the window at you. Just so you had to hug the buildings and stay close.
Well, early in your career, and I know this because Dad brought it to my attention, you and your partner are on the front page of the News or the Post, for delivering a baby. And I remember one day, I was in narcotics at the time, and Dad, the way Dad used to play us off each other, he goes, "Hey, shithead, come here, take a look at this. Your brother's on the front page of the paper. What have you done? Narcotics, come on." Like, just busted ball, right? I was like, I don't friggin' believe this. But then a short time after you were working with that guy, he wound up, after a night of indulging, getting himself in a lot of trouble, and basically ended his NYPD career. You want to tell that story?
I don't know if I can use his name, but
don't use his name.
He was a good guy. He was a cop's cop. The drug dealers were afraid of him. I worked with him for quite a bit. He also loved the ladies too. I can tell you once we were driving around. We're driving around, and this woman comes alongside of the car. Nice looking woman, Dominican woman. Screaming, drives on the opposite side of the road. We're in the patrol car, screaming at us in Spanish. Cuts us off, gets out, reaches underneath her skirt, pulls out a tampon, and throws it at the front window. And I'm going to call him Mike. And I'm going, Mike, what the hell? I'm getting ready to jump out of the car and throw this woman in cuffs. And he goes, no, don't worry about it. So I don't speak Spanish fluently, so I couldn't understand half the stuff she was saying. He gets out, he starts yelling at her, she starts smacking him, and I'm going, Mike, what are you... He goes, shut up and stay in the car, don't worry about it, I got this. Turns out it was one of his girlfriends, that he was probably cheating on another girlfriend, and there we are with a tampon filled with blood on our front windshield. Okay, so, like I said, we were... me and Mike had broken up as partners, and he was doing summons duty and I was doing evidence. And he got drunk and went to a bar one night, and it was not a friendly bar. It was not a cop-friendly bar. You always have to worry about, you go to bars that are cop-friendly with other cops that the bartender knows you. This wasn't a cop-friendly bar. This was a neighborhood bar, a local bar.
And that's why there are cop bars, because cops, when they're off duty, the last thing in the world they want is to get into a fight, get into trouble, have to break something up. So they'll go to a place that's cop friendly, like my brother's saying, where there's going to be no problems. If you go into like a tough guy bar, a lot of times, and somebody figures out you're a cop, you're going to get your balls broken. That's why cops tend to kind of herd together after work.
Well, I wasn't there for what happened, and what happened was, there was several stories about what happened, but he was throwing ice at the bartender who was being slow. A couple of the locals knew who he was and weren't favorable about him. They jumped him. He pulled out his gun. While they were wrestling with him, a shot went off, and a girl at the end of the bar, one of the barmaid, got shot in the head. Dead. Right on the spot. Well, I wasn't there for that part, but I came into the precinct at 3 a.m, and Mike was there all hunched over with the captain screaming over him, and the press outside and everything. And that night, you want to talk about being in a bad place at a bad time. That night I was working on our house, and I was jacking up the floor, and the wood that I had on the jack popped out, and it hit me on the right side of the face. So my eye blows up. I got a big black and blue. But we were supposed to go to the Pine Tavern on Bronxwood Avenue. Me and my wife. I had promised it. Right, good food.
If you're in the Bronx, stop by the Pines. It's excellent food in large portions.
Get the pasta vazul. So she's going, oh, I told you not to do that, and now we can't. I said, we'll go to the Pines. So we went to the restaurant with my eye in a big jammy, and this was around 7 o'clock at night, and thank God we did that, because I show up for work at 3 o'clock in the morning. I walk in the station house. You have investigations, you have internal affairs, you have inspections, you have the duty captain, you have shoe flies, buzz flies, all going around the house, and there I walk in, his ex-partner with a big eye jammy with blood underneath it.
Fight at the bar.
And they call me in the back. Now, I have no idea what happened with Mike. And they went, so what happened to your eye? And I says, I was working on my house. And they says, what time? I says, like, I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock. And they went, do you have... I says, yeah, my wife. They said, anybody else? I said, yeah, the Pine Tavern. I went to the Pine Tavern at 6, 7 o'clock at night. And I'm going, what's going on? I don't understand why I'm being, and they had a lawyer with me. And I'm looking at him. He goes, just keep your mouth shut. And I went, why do I need to keep my mouth shut? You're asking me how I got my eye jammy. I was jacking up my deck. If you want to go, you can see where the thing hit me. And the lawyer's going, shut your mouth, shut your mouth. And I'm going, why am I shutting my mouth? I mean, it's... And then finally, so then he says, can I have a moment with my client? And I'm going, what the hell is going on? And the union representative he's going, Fredo, shut up. And he went, Mike shot somebody. And I went, when? Last night. Where? now suddenly all the blood comes out of me, and it's like, oh my God. But
yeah, it sucked. He threw away his career and he wound up doing time. Is he out?
yeah, he I think he did a 4 to 7.
That's the worst place in the world for any cop to go, especially.
Yeah,
in New York.
I'll tell you another story with me and him. We were driving around, and we used to do this thing because you get bored sometimes. It was a spring, so you would try, when guys would have their coffees in their laps, eating, you'd pull up in front of them, and then you'd back up and you'd hit the front of their car. You'd either try and pop the airbags. It was a douche move, but you did it to your friends. So you pop the airbags, or you get them to spill their coffee on themselves. I'm not saying I was the most professional. I brought a lot of juvenile behavior, but this is stuff that we did. So 2 of our buddies were in the car. We pull up, we pull in front of them. They think we're going to get out. They got their coffees. We hit them. They spill their coffees all over themselves. We take off. They take off after us. We drive down 165 Street, and we look to the left-hand side, and it looks like somebody hung a mannequin on a fence. So we go, ain't that some shit? So we drive, and they came in, and they hit us from behind, and we take off around the corner, and I'm going, that's some crap. I said, you see that thing hanging on the fence? 2 seconds over the air, we got a jumper that came out the window on 165. Female, jumped out the window.
She's impaled.
Possible suicide. Yeah, so we come back around, and we were the first 4 people on the scene. The other guy's covered in coffee, and us. She's butt naked, impaled on a fence. So she was impaled on the fence, and she looked like a rag doll. It didn't look real.
I know.
And people are screaming, and so we yelled, listen, somebody get a blanket. Somebody get a blanket. We put the blanket over her. Turns out she had won, it was an illegal lottery that she won. So like the Italians have a lottery, and the Russians and the Polish and the Chinese have an illegal lottery. So she had won a Dominican lottery of about $44,000 or $45,000. And she was in a bedroom, and somebody started banging on a door. So she thought she was getting rolled. So she figured she'd jump out on the fire escape and run downstairs to the next thing. Well, she jumped out a window without a fire escape. She was so scared. And I don't even know who was at the door. But
she probably told somebody about that ticket and had second thoughts about it. And then when there was a knock on the door, it probably scared the shit out of her.
Well, she jumped out the wrong window, so they couldn't get her. So ESU was called immediately. ESU was always in our neighborhood. So if you were in a busy precinct,
right,
emergency services always hung out in the busier places because that's usually where the stuff happened. So they tried to get her off the fence, couldn't get her off she was in there. So they had to cut the fence to put her in the ambulance. So she went there inside the ambulance attached to a fence.
Did she survive?
No. That's going to be a hard no.
Well, no, you said they cut the fence and rushed her to the hospital, so I'm wondering, they wouldn't have gone through all that if she wasn't breathing.
No. She was done. She was done on impact. I mean, it went right through her.
So after a while, you became the precinct property clerk. So what a precinct property clerk does is arrest evidence, found property, anything that enters an NYPD precinct is stored. It's cataloged and stored. And every NYPD precinct has what's called a property clerk. And their job is to inventory this stuff, make sure what's on that voucher is in that envelope or bag. And then it's like a weighing station, the precinct property locker, until it fills. And then it's brought down to a larger facility called the property clerk's office. I think it's on Pearson Place. And that was your job for a while. What was the largest cash seizure that you saw come through your precinct?
Ooh, okay. I'll give you a good story on that one. So, being the evidence guy, so anytime you watch one of these TV shows and they hold up a bag in court that has a screwdriver in it or a gun in it or a hair in it, that's taken by the cop. The cop puts it in the bag, categorizes it, puts it in the closet behind the desk. So I live in that closet. And anything that comes in, 15 to 30 to 45 pieces a day of evidence come in. We're talking any guns, drugs, money, kilos. One day I came into my office, and there's these kilos sitting on my desk, and they had been freshly pressed in gasoline. My whole office stunk. So I walked in there. The minute
Well, why don't they just take it down to the friggin' lab?
Well, they just seized it and brought it to the precinct and put it in, because the room is behind the desk, so nobody has access to it. So I walk in, and my office is literally flammable. If anybody within, a 20-foot area lights a cigarette, that thing is going up. And it's leaching onto my desk, all my papers, or everything. So one day I get called. Me and my partner get called out. They said there was a robbery in progress. One drug dealer was robbing another drug dealer. So what the drug dealer did was they called the police, the ones that were getting robbed. They were banging on the door. They were shooting through the door. So they called the police so they wouldn't get killed. We're on our way, lights and sirens. You hear the gunshots going. So everybody's running upstairs. Me and my partner and a couple of sergeants run into the back of the courtyard. They're throwing bags of money out the window, like the little rascals. Bags of money, cocaine, everything's hitting the ground. And we see a woman in a pink shirt. Now, it's about 5 stories up. You see a woman in a pink shirt, her and another guy throwing stuff out the window. They don't catch the guys. They go in, they bust the place. By the time they get through the door, there's nothing in there. There's no money, there's no drugs. They're throwing scales out the window. So we're down there. So the sergeant looks at me and says, Fredo, let's get the captain over here. Let's verify this money. I'm talking garbage bags filled with money. We bring it back to the precinct. The captain's looking at it. They're trying to put it in the counting machines. There's so much money. There's about 7 bags, garbage bags filled with money. Singles, 10s, 20s. Captain goes, Captain Mineta. I can say his name. He's retired. Good captain, the bulldog. And he goes, he didn't have much use for me and my partner. He goes, you and you, get this money, get with the sergeant, go downtown. Go to One Police Plaza, have it counted down there. There's too much money here. I don't feel safe. So we throw it in the back of the car. We're driving it downtown. As we're driving, there's cars following us. You got to imagine, when it was fully counted, there was $650,000 in cash. They ran it through the machines multiple times. When I got in the elevator, because I had 3 bags, my partner had 2 bags, the sergeant had 2 bags. We pulled into the garage in One Police Plaza. We get in there, and all I could think about is like something in the movies, like somebody's gonna want to walk in the elevator, and they're gonna go, "How you doing?" Pull out a silencer, go bip bip bip. So when I got in the elevator, in One Police Plaza, I had my hand on my gun, and I had it out of the holster. I says, nobody's gonna cut. I said, this is like one of those things where it's a setup. Like it almost felt like it was gonna be in a movie. We got up to the floor, we counted the money, and then I had to go and testify on it. And the worst part was they threw the case out because when they got into the apartment, everybody stripped their clothes off, including the woman. Everybody was butt naked. So when I went to testify, they said, well, did you see the woman? I said, yeah, she was wearing a pink shirt. They says, well, when they went into the apartment, they were naked. I says, yeah. They said, so there was no woman in a pink shirt. I says, I can only tell you what I saw from the street, from the back alley. They found all of them not guilty. Now, street justice took the place because they all wound up disappearing. Because they lost all the money, they lost all the product and everything. They were never seen and heard from again afterwards. I don't know where they went, but they
up there. Yeah, those dealers up there, they don't screw around. So, as a cop, I know it from the other end. I vouch as something, I put it in an envelope, and sometimes the property clerk will hunt you down and go, "Hey, what's this?" Or "You can't vouch of this," or "There's got another." What was this? And cops can be lazy. What was the most ridiculous thing a cop tried a voucher that didn't belong in there? You know what I mean? Like, and I've seen it with cops in different precincts trying to get something through there. Do you have any stories like that where a cop vouching something ridiculous and like, what the fuck are you doing?
I got 2 good stories on this. I'll give you the first quick story. It was in the summer, and there was they vouched an ice cream truck. They were dealing out of a Mr. Softy ice cream truck, but it wasn't Mr. Softy. It was Mr. Soft. And every time, so they bring it into the precinct. When they were trying to get the guys, they pulled the back doors off. They got the drugs, they got the money, so they voucher the ice cream truck. The brakes on it are shot. So it's basically grinding metal. Every time you go to put the brakes on, the music starts. So the thing is in the back of the precinct for 3 days. We call for a tow for it because the brakes are so bad, nobody wants to drive it, so it has to be towed to the pound. All the ice cream, all the food in there, because they were also selling fried bananas, and it was a full-service truck. You could get fried bananas, chicharrones, ice cream, and drugs. So all of it starts going bad. Ice cream starts melting, rats, roaches are coming out of there. The thing, after 3 days in the summer sun, it stinks. It's horrible. The captain goes to us, we got to get it out of here. I says, we got a tow on it. The tow company says it's going to be about 30 days. You have other people in front of you, other evidence vehicles that got to go to the pound. He says, I don't care how you get it out of here. Get it to the pound. So our precinct was a couple of blocks off of Broadway. And this had to go out to Brooklyn through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. So it's a straight shot down Broadway, through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, right off the exit, a couple of miles, and the pound is right there. So me and my partner draw straws. Who's going to drive it? He gets the straw. My partner was a big guy. He was a lovable guy. He was strong as anything. He had very little patience. He gets in a full Tyvek suit. Now, these are one of the things that you would see on
we had to wear,
CSI.
when I used to go to the dump out in Staten Island after 9/11, I used to put on one of those Tyvek suits. You look like you were a spaceman.
Right. So the rats and roaches, there was nothing you could do. So he puts on the full suit, he gets in there, and he starts driving. And he can only go about 5-10 miles an hour. So I'm following behind him in an unmarked patrol. People start coming up and asking for ice cream. My partner, very little patience. Get out of here, get out of here, there's no ice cream. Kids are screaming ice cream. He's starting to blow lights at 5 miles an hour. Every time he hits the brakes are grinding. You could hear the metal grinding brakes on the brakes. And he hits it all the way down Broadway, all through the financial district. The music is playing. People are walking up to him. He's screaming. He's sweating to death. Every once in a while, he'll jump out and pant and spit and throw up. Going through the tunnel was horrible for him. And I'm following behind him on the loudspeaker, and I'm going, ice cream, guys, ice cream. And he's trying to go as fast. With his foot down on the pedal, the thing went maybe 10, 20 miles an hour. He gets out there. I had to take out the next 10 garbage cars filled with drugs, blood, human secretions, whatever you could possibly think. I had the next horrible 10 cars to go out to the pound after that.
You once had a dead man's remains that you had to carry around until you found a place for his final resting place, which is going to be in my next book. But quickly go through that one, about how you had to carry a dead man's remains for how long was it?
We had him for quite a while. I don't know the actual amount of time. So a woman holding her husband's ashes. So the rookie cop, who doesn't know any better, vouches the box of ashes. Now it's not like the normal with the urn that you get and everything. It was a box, yay by yay. It had his name. It was an old green box. It almost looked like a military box. Maybe it was a military box. It had his name on it. It has a date. And back then, they didn't really, when they incinerated the bodies, they really didn't incinerate it all the way. So if you shook it, there was still bones and pieces in there. So the cop vouches it, puts it into the precinct. I come in on Monday after the weekend where it's there. I look on the shelf. I see human remains. I call the cop. I says, what'd you do? He says, well, the sergeant told me to take it. I says, you're both idiots. I says, you know you can't take human remains. I says, well, let's go and find somebody to give it to. Let's go find a relative. Or we'll go to the funeral home. So we go to the funeral home. They didn't have money for her. So they sent it down to be buried in a mass grave. So we try and do some research to find out next of kin. There is no next of kin. There's nobody. So what I need is to find somebody to sign for these ashes. So I was asking around, does anybody know her? Does anybody want to sign for this guy's ashes? There has to be a destination. I have 30 days to get rid of him. I have inspections. I have internal affairs. I have shoe flies. I have internal inspections. I have all
Everybody
these
watches
people.
the property. I'll back up. So in a precinct, it's just not like you handle things. There's so many checks and balances with property in the NYPD, and just like those units you just named, they're constantly coming in there to make sure nothing is missing and nothing gets misappropriated. So, I mean, you're under the gun with this stuff.
Everybody, it goes where it's supposed to go. There has to be a storage number. There has to be a date. There has to be a time. And then if not, you have to explain why. So now I'm frantically trying to get, now I'm driving around with this guy. And I'm starting to feel, me and my partner, we're starting to feel bad for him. So every time we take him out, I'll call him Lester. I'll look at him and say, okay, Lester, we're going through the tunnel. Okay, Lester, we're going over the bridge. Okay, Lester. And then we'd sit there and eat, and Lester was next to us. So then Lester became a third with me and my partner doing our stuff.
Well,
so
how long was Lester on tour with you and your partner?
He was, okay, so he's supposed to go to his destination within 30 days. So I tried to get him, so there's a place out in Brooklyn, there's a place out in Queens called Pearson Place that has pickle barrels that you can put, bloody clothes, all kinds of messed up stuff, the pickle barrels. So they wouldn't accept it because it was human remains. So I brought it out to Brooklyn, to Erie Basin, where they have a giant warehouse, which just burnt down recently. Thousands upon thousands of barrels. It stinks like death. I tried to get it in those pickle barrels. They wouldn't take it. I tried to bring it to the morgue. They wouldn't take it. So each time I have to sign Lester out and bring Lester back. So my wife was a teacher at the time. So we got so used to talking to Lester that I took two googly eyes as a joke. And I stuck it to the bag. Because she had... I know. Listen, you had to be there. So I had to look Lester in the eyes when I was talking to him. So then you didn't want to leave Lester in the car, because if Lester was stolen, then I can't put a destination on him. So Lester went in with us to Cat's Deli. Lester went into Nathan's Hot Dogs in Brooklyn. Lester went into us at 2nd Avenue Deli. Lester went everywhere. So finally, the boss got on me and he goes, listen, you got to make this guy disappear. And he was starting to become, a good luck charm for us too. So Lester had to go. So we finally found a place for Lester to go. There's an island, Ward's Island, where they Hart's Island, where they bury the indigent and the homeless, and they don't do that anymore because they burn everybody now. But back then they used to do mass burials. So you pull up a giant ferry out there. You got to sign it away. We pulled the googly eyes off Lester. We said goodbye. It was a very emotional scene. We said goodbye to Lester. We handed him to the guy. The guy looked at me and went, are you for real? I said, sign here. Sign. Give me a storage number. Number 1. Okay. And Lester got buried out in a mass grave.
Yeah, Hart's Island sits between the Bronx and Long Island. It's right in the middle of Long Island Sound, and they've buried, like my brother said, the unclaimed dead for probably over 100 years. I mean, a lot of famous people. Typhoid Mary was buried out there. I didn't know that they stopped doing that. And what Department of Corrections would do is, once or twice a week, they would take trustee inmates, so guys that are in jail for suspended driver's license or failure to pay child support. They're only going to do a year, and they know they're not going to try to escape. What they'll do is they'll run a shuttle out there once a week or twice a week. Department of Corrections will bring a van full of these trustee inmates. They'll take them to City Island. They board a ferry with pine boxes of the unclaimed dead, and they go out there and they bury them 8 deep. So I guess Lester got tossed in one of those holes.
And he probably wound up with his wife too, because she didn't go to the morgue.
That's where she went.
Yeah. Sometimes they were just bags. They would get so many of them on the ferry going out there. So that there endeth the story.
Well, there's more to that story, which will be in my next book. So you once had a PR-24 side handle baton explode during the filming of a movie. Let's close out with that story.
Okay. They was filming Die Hard 3, in our neighborhood, and it was around 179th Street, or yeah, probably around between 179th and 169th. So they put us up on the roofs to make sure that nobody threw stuff off. So it was the scene where Bruce Willis was outside the bodega. So they have us on the roof stationed, I mean on just about every roof, to make sure that and when they say silence, they want silence. It comes over the air, they're going to start filming silence. So we actually saw it being filmed. So my partner, great guy, not much brains, he's up there with his PR-24 baton. Now these things are like, they're formed plastic. I don't know what they're made of. So it has a handle on it, and it looks like a tomahawk if you hold it in a certain position. So he was getting bored. So they start filming. And, quiet on the set, everybody quiet, make sure they call it airmail. Make sure there's no airmail coming down. Everybody watch your sixes. They start filming. Right in the middle, my partner starts taking his baton and hitting it on the roof, on the parapet wall, which is a hard concrete stone. And he's hitting it and hitting it and hitting it. And I'm going, come on, man, let's hit. And he's going, what? Am I making too much noise? And he whacks it, and the thing explodes. It literally breaks into 1,000 and shatters like glass. I had no idea that nobody had any, but the pop was loud enough to sound like a gunshot. The next thing you know, shots fired, shots fired. 179 and Edgecombe Avenue. Do we have any eyes on it? Do we have any eyes on it? And I have to be the one. And he's looking at me and I'm looking at him, and it's like, it was us. What? And I come over and it's like, we have eyes on it, wasn't a shot. Confirm. Get a supervisor on the scene.
Oh.
And I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, we're screwed. They said, what post? Post 7. Sergeant comes running up to the roof with the lieutenant. He goes, what happened?
Just say it dropped it.
He says, I had my PR-24 up against the wall. He says, it accidentally hit the thing and exploded. Look. And then they go over there and they went, disregard. Everybody. 20 minutes for them to get the shot back up, to get all the actors back up, to get the lighting and everything. The boss looks at me and he goes, you two are idiots. And I went, well, one of us is.
Did you get to meet Bruce Willis?
No. I really wasn't that big into stars back then. A lot of stars came up to our precinct. Gene Hackman was up there filming the Royal Tenenbaums. Sandra Bullock was up there filming something at...
You met Harrison Ford.
I met Harrison Ford. Very nice guy. He drove with the Devil's Own. He drove around, shook his hand. Just very humble, nice guy to be around. They drove
I met
around
him too during filming The Devil's Own. I found him the same way. Very, very mellow guy.
Brad Pitt drove around with a bunch of the guys. They said they had fun with him back in the day. But I really wasn't. You were a big time detective. You were. I'm gonna get the guy. And I do my job and I go home. And I have fun doing it. And trust me, I had fun doing it.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. Do you have anything else you want to close out with?
No, I have nothing to sell. Everything in my body hurts. I live in exile.
You don't live in exile. All right. I want to thank my younger brother, Fredo Ferrari, for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it. I also want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Stamford, Connecticut, Manuka, Illinois, McKinney, Texas, and Littleton, Colorado. If you have a business or product you'd like me to promote on your show, especially those of you who work in law enforcement, drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram @VicFerrari50, and we'll talk. If you enjoy the content, please check out my books on Amazon. Type in my name, Vic Ferrari like the car, where you can preview all my books for free, including NYPD Law and Disorder. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll have another episode up next week.